because we can't put up a recording unless we record it. All right, good. Thank you. Hi, everybody. This is Nancy, and there's Kitty. If you are using a camera, we can see your face. If you're not, you can just hear us, but you should all be able to see the slides. And as you checked in, there's a place to check your audio, and we're hoping for lots of participation, verbal participation tonight. That makes things more lively. So we'll help you find your microphone so that you can jump into the conversation. So I want to start by saying we're starting right at 7 p.m. tonight, and the goal is to be done by 8:30. For those of you who want to see the president's final message at 9 o'clock, or if you want to have a life, we'll be done by 8:30 tonight. So tonight we're talking a little bit about from idea to policy. The first 4 or 5 modules and content chunks in the course are supposed to fill your head with ideas, divergent ideas about policy, education policy, and the way it plays out in your school and in your classroom. After our webinar tonight, the next 4 or 5 modules are mostly tools to help you think about your project. And I'll give you a demonstration of one of those at the end of the webinar tonight. But we're pretty much done with readings, and we're pretty much done with assignments that need to be handed in. The next thing is the project, basically. If you haven't handed something in, we can take it at any time. That's not an issue right now. So, and you can keep chatting away on the Facebook page. I'd like to briefly kind of remind you about the history of policy. My favorite way of looking at this is, and always has been, the model that Gary Sykes shared in one of the readings, where he says that the early school policy, a century ago, policy was like an avocado. Education was like an avocado, and the policy is the thin skin that holds it together, but the locus of control is that big giant seed in the center. Back then, schools were run by the people who were in them. State policy and not very much federal policy at all, virtually none. And the student body was a nice, creamy, light yellow and very non-diverse. 50 years later, education policy was a lot more like a cantaloupe. That center locus of control had been kind of shredded a bit, and policy and control had been dispersed somewhat to states and somewhat to schools, and policy was still a thin rind, but a little thicker than the avocado. And since then, we've become a watermelon with policy scattered here and there, a very diverse student body, and a thick, inedible rind of policy holding us all together. So in answer to the question, there has been a shift. I have really enjoyed reading the things that you sent, your reflections, and one of the comments that was made by one of the folks in the class was that we're not really studying policy, because policy is what's made in the legislature. That a name for the legislature in Virginia. That is it the House of something?
Delegates and the General Assembly is the name.
the General Assembly, that's right. And there's been a shift, but this person said that we're not really studying policy. You know, we're just talking about practice here. But I disagreed with that, because every policy that you make, even if you have a policy that you can't wear hats in your classroom, or if you have a policy that papers get 50% credit if they're a day late, or any of those things that you do to manage your classroom are policies, even if, you know, they're not made in the legislature. And what we are talking about here is, I think, policy. But I'm going to pause here and ask if anybody would like to take me on, or make a comment about that. Anyone?
In order to comment, you just need to unmute yourself by going to your little thumbnail and clicking on the microphone.
When you speak of policy like that, it makes it sound like there's no basis for support in it. It's like it can be overruled very easily. But yet we hear often of government policy that is not easily overruled. And that just is kind of confusing, using that same word, you know, sort of like mandate policy. Wherein do I have any control?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not a surprise that policy and politics are related. You know, they're from the same word stem. They're policies at different levels, and one of the reasons that we have discussed mandates and inducements and capacity building and all the different forms of policy is, even though they are all policies, some of them are big, heavy-duty, punishable, you know, things, and some of them are much smaller and localized and easily edited and controlled. So yeah, I usually, when you say policy, first of all, people's eyes glaze over, you know, and but that's a good point. But as you're thinking about your project, for example, you don't have to try to change a law, although it's cool if you want to, or propose a law, or, you know, speak to a policymaker, you know, at a higher level. But you know, it happens here and there. So, good point. I get it, what you're saying. So, moving along. Or anybody else? Sorry. All right. This is just a follow-up to that. Why is it important that we're thinking about this or doing that? Anybody want to chime in on that?
Well, it affects us. You know, I can't even tell you how many times I've heard or overheard conversations amongst teachers frustrated by a policy that's made by someone other than themselves. And it could be department-wide, school-wide, or county-wide, or statewide, or federal. But I think it's important to analyze or craft policy, because that way we get a say.
Yeah. Or your work.
Sorry, that's kind of what I was going to say too. I have a sign above my door as my students leave my classroom that says, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And I feel like this is our world in our classroom, and we'd want to try to change it to be the way that is best for our students, and who better at creating that than the people that are in front of them every single day, instead of the ones who sat in the classroom for their high school careers and then think that they have the best answers on how to run those classrooms because they sat in them.
That's what I always say, that teachers are the experts. And what other profession do you have where the experts have such limited say? And, you know, that teachers are the ones that should be informing the policy, right? Because they have the hands-on experience.
And I feel like this is new, I know for me, because like what was said before, we didn't have anything to do with this, or we weren't given the chance to express our opinions, or we gave our opinions, but it really didn't matter. So this whole idea of even crafting policy is like, it's huge. And it seems cumbersome. Like I still can't wrap my head around it.
And if I could chime in, we in Chesterfield, we just got an email today from one of our persons on high with our new calendar for next year. And in Chesterfield, the majority of people that I talked to, we all agreed that we would rather have our winter break from Tuesday to like Tuesday, because we had to go back on the 2nd. In the grand scheme of things, you know, we're lucky to have 2 weeks off. But ACTS and every person that made a comment on that calendar said, why don't we go from Tuesday before Christmas, if you want to call it that, and come back on the 3rd. And I'd be daggone, the calendar came out today, and we're going back on the 2nd again. And so here we actually tried to do what we were supposed to do. We made appropriate comments. We talked to the powers that be, and I don't even know why they put the calendar out to begin with, because they weren't going to change it. So it's just that part. That's just a little part, I think, of the broad picture, is that when we do make statements as educators, that, you know, it sometimes, I would say the majority of times, in the powers that be don't listen. In my school, it's different on the school level, but when you get higher up, it's kind of like decisions are already made. We're going to go through the motions and just allow people to make comments, but we are not going to listen to them.
Hi. Well, I mean, who was it? Lorna that said that, and Kitty and Nancy have, I'm sure, a lot of perspectives on this too. But my experience is that there are steps in this, and the first step is having your say, but you only really can make change if you have the power to force the people that are in power to do what you're asking. So most of the time we stop at the ask. It's like we go and we make a statement. We're kind of saying, would you do this? And until we have the capacity, meaning a standing room only, you know, of enough people saying, do it this way or not, they kind of know that that's all we're doing is asking. I mean, I don't know. This might be way beyond where we are in the webinar tonight. But my experience with policy is you can't just ask. You have to be able to back it up with the power and the force to influence what happens if they don't do what you asked.
Yeah. Yes. And that is kind of where hopefully we will end up at the end of this course, with tools to get people past the ask. And some of those tools are, you know, joining up and finding friends, as you just said, when you pack the room, you know, various channels of communication, carefully looking at your stakeholders and seeing where your allies are, and who's going to oppose you and why they're opposing you. And so yeah, that's the end of the process, is and persistence. There's a wonderful story in one of the things that we read about a teacher in South Carolina who wanted, this is maybe 15 years ago, who wanted to institute all-day kindergarten. And she went to she knew people in the legislature, and she knew business owners. You know, her husband worked for BMW, which is huge in South Carolina. And so she actually hosted this event on the floor of the South Carolina legislature, where everybody was walking around with balloons. And I mean, it was a really big deal. And then a week later, they took a vote and shut her down. and then about 4 or 5 years later, a virtually identical resolution passed. She kind of laid the groundwork. So sometimes you have to lay the groundwork and just keep persisting. But anyway, more about that to come. I wanted to share this with you because it's such an amazing diagram. And it's Race to the Top. Talk about your watermelon policy. You can see on this diagram, and maybe you can't. I mean, I have a large screen, so I can read all of it. But there are the 4 main goals in Race to the Top, which is the delivery system for the No Child Left Behind, which has now morphed into ESSA. But they had 4 goals: turning around the lowest performing schools, number 1. Number 2, developing, rewarding, and retaining teachers and principals. Number 3 was the Common Core standards, and they had to go through the states because the feds couldn't do that. And I'm sorry, I'm talking blah, blah, policy speak here. But number 4 was about data systems, strengthening data systems. But if you look up at the top of this graph, the yellow bit, recruiting, developing, rewarding, and retaining teachers and principals. That was one of their 4 pillars, their 4 goals to roll out for federal policy. And they had 2 sub-goals. One was a coaching program called America's Choice. I don't know if you're familiar with that in Virginia, but it's kind of a prepackaged teacher development program. And the second goal was using Teach for America. I was really kind of surprised when I saw this, because it was a good example of how Teach for America, which started out as a pretty low-key policy proposal, a suggestion created by Wendy Kopp when she was a senior at Yale for her thesis, that wouldn't it be great if we could fill spots that were in hard to staff schools with her friends, basically Ivy League graduates who were not planning to go into education but would teach for 2 years and then take that experience out into their real lives and careers. And that's really what it was. If you've ever read Wendy's thesis, it's pretty much a 2-year temporary employment program where advantaged students give back to the community. Not a bad idea. And then 15 years later, they're part of the largest policy initiative in the federal policy initiative in the United States as a way to recruit, develop, reward, and retain high quality teachers. There was quite a shift from one to the other. So how were they able to do this? And this is kind of a wrap-up of that 15-page monograph about Teach for America. They ran into, when they were trying to include Teach for America as a way to retain and develop high-quality teachers, they ran into a snag, and that was that the original policy, the No Child Left Behind policy, had a clause or a segment calling for highly qualified teachers, saying that no longer are we going to a teacher teach science without a major or minor in science. People can't be a math teacher in 8th grade unless they've studied math in college. People can't be a special ed teacher without special certification and training for that. We're not going to let just anyone into the classroom. And of course, Teach for America teachers don't have education degrees. They go into the classroom with 5 weeks of summer school training. And they're often placed in situations where they're not certified or trained to take the job. So that was to name Teach for America as a way to recruit and retain highly qualified teachers. They ran into a policy snag. But somehow, as you probably read, they got around that. And I love this quote. It's right out of that monograph. How were they able to bypass this language? Well, these 4 senators who were all on the education committee, or were the majority leader, had aides or connections, or they all had connections to people who had been Teach for America core members or were working for Teach for America. In the 15 years since the project started, it had completely infiltrated, if that's the right word, policy channels at the very highest levels. So they just walked right past the idea that Teach for America teachers weren't highly qualified under federal policy language. Okay, that's a lot of blah, blah, but it's a good example of the power, the enormous power that Teach for America and money that Teach for America has attracted and developed in their relatively short life. They've been around for between 25 and 30 years now. And I've been really interested in following your discussion on the Facebook page about America. So, and there have been a lot of really great questions raised, and pros and cons, and information from people who have been Teach for America core members and now work for the organization, as well as information of people who said, I never heard of it before, who's ever done this. So we're coming at this from a lot of really divergent viewpoints, and that's good. So here are some questions to think about. The rule of thumb with any policy is that it's developed because it addresses a problem or a need. There's something that needs changing, and someone says, I have a better idea about how to do that, and they propose a policy. So what do we think about Teach for America as a way to improve teacher quality, as it was supposed to do under federal law, or as a way to build leadership for change? Those are 2 kind of different things, but I'm going to be quiet here for a while, and please jump in and answer a question or a couple questions, or throw out one of your own. Go.
I'll start, since I actually did have a lot of experience. I was a teaching fellows, which is kind of like a branch of Teach for America. And, I got my master's for free. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to be a teacher. But I was one of the few who wanted to be a teacher since I was 11 years old, and was denied the first time I applied because I had too many education credits from my undergrad. I had taken too many education courses, but I was going to be a teacher. So the first time I was denied, I was like, that's it, I'm done. I'm just going to go, work in Barnes & Nobles with my English degree. And they needed more teachers in the city. So the second time around, were like, okay, we'll take you. And I wanted to be an elementary school teacher my whole life. They have enough elementary school teachers in the city, so I had to do secondary. So I taught middle school for 2 years. And I loved it, and I would have stayed there, but my school was becoming a charter school, and I was just going to have to reapply for my own job to stay in my own classroom. And after going to school for 2 years with the Teach for America core people, we had 5,000 members that year, and half were gone by the end of the first year because they don't really prepare you enough. They give your student teaching is to watch a summer school class, and then you have your own classroom in September. And after teaching now for 13 years, I couldn't imagine having my student teacher, even after a month of being in my classroom every day in a real classroom, not just summer school, throwing her in her own classroom. and leaving her alone completely, not even having been through an education course. My only class I had before that was technology in the classroom. I was in the Bronx with 7th graders and 8th graders, and they didn't have computers anywhere. So I had to buy my own paper. What was technology in the classroom going to do for me at that point? So I have a very different standpoint, I think, than most people, since I didn't go through the normal educational route. But at the end of the day, if I didn't have this program, I would be stuck in Barnes & Noble with my teaching, with my English degree, and not being able to be a teacher. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I have a love-hate relationship, but I do think that it undermines all of the great teachers that do teach in those areas and live in those areas, because they have these kids, you know, fresh out of college that think they're doing charity work by teaching there for 2 years as a stepping stone. And it really, the turnover hurts the kids there because there's no consistency where they need the consistency the most in their life. So that's my input.
That was my concern with Teach for America, is how quickly they leave the community. And if they're not really vested in it, because often they're put into communities that are not their own or even near where they grew up. And so that was my biggest concern with it. While it may be great that they're in there and there are some that want to continue on with the path, how many stick with it? And how many of them then use the monies that they're saving from, you know, school loans being paid to further on and become truly highly qualified and reach a particular niche in that environment?
To piggyback off of what Laura said, I found an article on Education Week, and it mentioned that the turnover wasn't too dissimilar from what you would see, let's say, in Philadelphia schools. But overall in that population, it was greatly more so than what you would see in a normal school anyway. And so it does beg you to the question of, these are areas that desperately need teachers, not just inner city schools. For example, in Boone County in West Virginia, where they don't have money to pay for a sufficient amount of teachers. They do need them, but they need ones that are going to stay, who are connected with the community. You're going to learn how to reach the population. You know, teacher turnover and attrition right now is a huge issue to begin with. And it has to be said that this probably doesn't help that on a national level, on a local level at all.
Were you done, Allison?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think one of the things that I think at the beginning, TFA was a really good initiative to encourage teachers to teach in those hard to staff areas. But I think that as it got more unwieldy and it got more governmental influence, or tried to get more governmental money, is when the goals got a little blurry. I have taught in Henrico, I taught at a hard to staff school. And it was hard to staff, not because of the kids, and not because of the administration, and not because of the parents, though at times they were challenging. It was because of the administration of the county, the school board, and the people that were in charge of the school, and the higher ups, that were not willing to help us. I remembered one time I had a class of 35. I taught earth science that year. It was a collab class. My collab teacher was no help at all, according to what the collab model is supposed to be. And when you're teaching science, you're supposed to do lab. And one of the things we're supposed to do is try to have anywhere from 30 to 50% lab. And I was in a classroom where we could not move the tables around. It was a lab classroom, and the lab tables were entrenched with gas and water. And I had asked the science person for the county, was there any policy on how many students could be in a classroom to safely run a lab? I just wanted to know, because 35 students in a class that was built for 24 in lab stations, I just wanted to know. And she said, well, it sounds like you have a discipline issue. And it's like, I didn't say anything about discipline. And that was the kind of response that we got. I was like, okay, then maybe I'm not going to do those kind of labs. So again, to me, when I'm thinking about Teach for America, I think it's important that we get people in hard to staff areas, but it has to be more than a 1 year or 2 year plan. If they are training these young people or older people or these teachers, they should have to sign a contract. And they need to stay in the program, because as we all know, we have to build relationship with students. And even if you teach them for a year, you stay there, kids know who you are. So when the next group comes up, they're going to know you. And this plan, when there's no buy-in of the people that they're trying to hire, I think is a problem.
I kind of question the whole teacher quality, improve teacher quality. What does that mean? Are they receiving different instruction than what we're receiving? Or is it that they're receiving instruction on their particular community? So I don't know how I feel about, improved teacher quality. I don't know how I feel about that.
Brenda, I agree with you. I think it's a disservice to the profession and to the students to say, here's a 5-week class. At the end of the 5-week class, you will be adding improved teacher quality to these schools. But are you really? And I once heard, I had a colleague that worked with students from a different program, and when they would work with these up-and-coming teachers, they said on multiple years they heard the quote, well, we're here to save education. And I always found that kind of interesting, not understanding entirely where their viewpoint was. There are things that we need to improve in our educational system, but that perhaps how they were approaching it wasn't really any saving to begin with.
I agree. I think that we should look at ways of recruiting highly qualified teachers into these lower income areas instead of recruiting teachers with a 5-week training. I think teacher quality goes with education as well, even though we know that some teachers that come out of college aren't as prepared as other teachers coming out of college. But I think there is merit in receiving your teaching license. So that's kind of where I stand there.
Everyone remember that movie, the book and movie Freedom Writers, that, the teacher in California. Yeah, we all know it. I hate that story because I feel like if she cared about students so much, then she would have stayed for more than 2 years. She wouldn't have followed them to college. She wouldn't have wrote a book about her one experience in her one classroom. Everyone's like, oh my God, I want to teach it in my classroom. No, I hate that. I absolutely hate that book. And I refuse to use that as the feel-good story for my kids to read. And because I feel like that's the problem. All these people come into this program, they're like, oh, I'm going to go do great things for 2 years and then just move on my life. And that's not what teaching is. This is a profession that you need to be in it for the long haul. And you need to be that, there's that meme on Facebook right now with the woman that says, who says teaching is stressful? I'm 33 years old and I look great. And she looks like she's 95. And that's true. That is what teaching is. It's like, I don't know. I've had so many teachers look at me crazy when I say I hate that Freedom Writer story. Yes, and she did great things for those kids, but if she really did care about the profession, then she would have stayed in the classroom and did those great things year after year after year and touched so many more kids' lives than just the 15 that she did and then followed them to college. So
Well, what I don't like about that particular story in that movie is that it represents a teacher who has no life outside of teaching. And that becomes the expectation that, of course, you're going to sacrifice your entire life for your kids, and that's an unfair expectation. You are a full-blooded, holistic human being who has work as part of your life, but that should not, it's not even healthy to have it be all of your life. And that's what I find distasteful about that particular movie. And if I could, while everybody's quiet, if I could toss in just, my own impression of Teach for America is that it did start out with very lofty ideals, and the idea, who can argue with the idea that people should be willing to give back in some way to communities in need? And there was certainly a need there. Schools that need teachers in distressed areas, urban centers, and rural areas where they can't attract teachers otherwise. However, what it has morphed into, besides a very powerful group that has, as Tammy mentioned, powerful PAC on Federal Hill as well as in the states, what it has morphed into is a resume builder for young people who go to Ivy League schools for the most part and are on track to go to graduate school, law school, want to be superintendents perhaps someday. I had a student at the University of Richmond who had the stated goal that one day she wanted to be a school superintendent. Those folks are looking for a space between college and graduate school and to put something meaningful and that will look good on their resume. And Teach for America fits that bill perfectly. So instead of it really now being what it was intended to be, it is more or less window dressing on a resume, in my opinion.
I agree with you, Kitty. I went on their website and was like searching through all the alums. They're almost all lawyers or politicians or pretty much everything but a classroom teacher. And I also found it interesting that they have this teaching program, but what they're advertising is everything else as a result.
I think a small percentage stay with teaching, but not that many. Not that many make it through the full 2 years, frankly. They leave. But now that's also true for people who go through traditional programs. I was just talking to a young woman who quit in October in her first year of teaching because she was being bullied by her principal, and she couldn't take it and shouldn't take it.
I just posted a link to an article in Rethinking Schools about Teach for America, and it really does, I think the point that it makes and hones in on is that TFA is about the teacher and not about the kids. So it's about building, like Kitty was saying, the resume of the teacher. And so even though they're doing a disservice to the teacher by throwing them in without the training, that's ultimately their purpose. It's kind of like saying, go into the Peace Corps or something for 2 years. It's not about the students.
I don't know. I understand about the young people going to teach for a year or two and then move on. But again, you think about quality. How do they know? And then they go and be some kind of person who advocates for education when they haven't even been there long enough. I think that's what irritates me a lot of times, in that since in Virginia we went from appointing school board members to voting on school board members. I think that has caused some issues, but it helped. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. I think I just know from personal experience that when you have counselors who've never been in a classroom who try to tell you how to manage your classroom with kids in it. And I can't, I'm looking at them like, how can you tell me that? You've never been in a classroom. You know, you don't know. You can tell me about an individual student, and you could tell me about how to work with students who might have some mental health issues or things like that. But within my classroom, you can't speak from experience. And I do think that experience means a lot. I also think that the state did a disservice when they changed from the 3-year plan to the 5-year plan, whereby you had to go, if you were like we had 2 physics teachers and 2 chemistry teachers, which are really hard to find. And all 4 of those young people stayed in education. 3 of them stayed in there for 3 years because that was the amount of time they had before they had to finish their education part, which they did not do. We finally had a young man leave last June. He was wonderful with the kids. He was a really good teacher, but he did not finish his education classes. And he was tired of all the politics, so he left. But I think, again, you know, what defines quality? You know, what really defines quality, and what if TFA is about the teachers and not about the students, then maybe their goals need to be rethought about, because we don't need more administrators. We don't need more lobbyists talking about education. We need the people in the classroom. And I don't think we need to have government funds for Teach for America if that is what they're about, if it's just a stepping stone. I feel that we need these people in the classroom because they want to be there to teach the kids, not for them to get elected politically or go work in someone's office to make more reform that might not be beneficial to the kids, because that's really what we're in here for.
So some of the comments that have been going along with the group chat have been some details about the Richmond residency program that model has been executed elsewhere around the country. But a new teacher works with a cooperating teacher for year 1, and then they have like an additional 3-year contract, and they continue to be mentored by their cooperating teacher throughout that 4-year period, which is a really fabulous program. And I think it really highlights one of the things that education can do well, which is providing continuing professional development for teachers. And something that new teachers always struggle with is this feeling like you have to recreate the wheel. And Nicole brought up, and we were talking about the Erin person from Freedom Writers. I mean, she devoted her entire life to this group of students, and you shouldn't have to do that. But if you're working for Teach for America, it's not really about the teacher development, or it's not really about the professional development as a teacher. It's getting that like checkbox, like, hey, you worked at a school, you did like charity work for 2 years, good job you. And as someone else said, it's really not about the kids. It's really about getting that like 2-year checkbox. I feel like as a way to improve teacher quality, that's a really poor example, because you're not really providing ongoing teacher feedback and teacher development. But if you had something more like the residency model, where you're continuing to build leadership over like a 4-year period, like I feel like that would work really well. And I mean, unless you're within the TFA program, I don't know how you would change that. But I think it does. I think the TFA model highlights a lack of teacher professional development.
Teach for America was criticized a lot by the people who were Teach for America core members. They don't call their teachers, they're core members. And the Teach for America organization did reach out to try to make ongoing training better. As a matter of fact, for 2 years, I worked with Teach for America teachers in North Carolina. And I have to say that they were a nice bunch of young people. They were all young, just out of college, you know, somewhere between 21 and 25, and smart and principled and clueless. They wanted to do well, and they were quick learners, but I don't know about you, but you know, my first year of teaching, I probably should have paid the district where I worked. It takes time and practice, and actually a couple of things. One of them in the first time we were working, well, and what they really needed was teaching strategies. They didn't know how to teach kids. They'd not student taught, and they didn't know how to, teach a lesson on any number of things. So, but I mentioned to this group, well, I'm a national board certified teacher, and they all knew about national board certification, and the policy that they wanted changed was the ability of teachers to sit for national board certification in their first or second year. And I tried to explain, no, yeah, I know, no, I see your face. That's not a good idea. You don't understand. This is an evaluation of your expertise, which you do not have right now. And they're like, oh no, I want to do this. I know I could do this. And I thought, okay, you've been good at things all your life, but the new state superintendent in North Carolina is a 34-year-old Teach for America Corps member who ran against June Atkinson, who has been superintendent of schools in North Carolina for a long time, like 20 years. She was this veteran and kept running and kept getting elected, and she got booted out of office this year for this 34-year-old guy who was in the classroom for 2 years, 10 years ago. So that'll be an interesting case to watch. So if anybody has a last thought you want to share, go for it now. Otherwise, we're going to move on.
Well, I wanted to say that we have so many teacher shortages, even in my school, and I just was looking on the Virginia teacher shortage list. Since 1998, we've been short in language teachers, and we have tried everything. We've gone to the country and brought teachers over, the visiting faculty. That doesn't work because they don't know our style of kids. They're used to their style of kids, and they know their language, but they don't know how to teach it to someone who doesn't already speak it. And that was an epic fail. We tried to get any number of ways to get language teachers into our schools, and DCU doesn't have Spanish as a major anymore for education, and so we're sunk. I mean, every year we just say, okay, roll the dice, let's try to get someone. But I wish that there was a Teach for America that could maybe move teachers that want to teach certain languages, or I mean, not languages, certain subject areas to areas where there is a need, like maybe there's some people in California who there's too many Spanish teachers there, and maybe they can move them to Virginia somehow. I don't know. But I mean, it seems like such a good idea, and the reality just isn't as good as the thought, but I wish it could be tweaked to be a better system.
I agree
The
with
first thing that occurred to me, hold on. The first thing that occurred to me, Gail, was that this could be your project.
Okay.
You could draft a policy how would you get teachers, what thing could you try? You could be the Wendy Kopp of, Virginia language teachers. But
she makes $418,000 a year on her website, it says, so I could get a raise at the same time.
Seriously, simply crafting a policy, that would be a great project. What would that look like? So, and I'm sorry I butted in and somebody else was going to speak.
Oh no, it was just me, Allison Coons. Sorry, I've been trying to talk and I can't figure out, it's just not working. Anyway, no, I agree with everybody with what they're saying. I am concerned of what the actual point of Teach for America is. I think, you know, hearing other people's reservations, the goal in my mind would be to improve teacher quality, but with the background that it has, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, there's the professional development that might not follow, or the, resume building piece. I really think that the major player here is student learning and understanding students and what they need and how they can achieve it. But I don't feel like I saw that in a lot of the things that we talked about, which I think is concerning.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. Good point. Let's leave Teach for America behind now and move on to, okay, come on. There we go. I love this cartoon. It's about blogs and online media and how we get information. One of you, and I can't remember who it was, posted a comment within the last week or two saying you could spend an hour a day just reading blogs and following the conversation in education policy. And I wanted to say, an hour, that's all? Welcome to my life. And I'm not in the classroom anymore, so I do have more discretionary time and probably spend too much time tracking these down. But that's where it's happening today, and that changed over the last 35 years or so since I've been a teacher. It used to be you read books and you shared them, and you got the newsletter from your union or your disciplinary organization or your school division, and policy was something that happened elsewhere. But there are lots and lots of teachers now talking about advocacy and policy, and so I wanted to give you a chance to share anything that you found interesting in the blogs that we read. There were some more conservative and traditional blogs, and some more crazy people, more passionate advocates for certain things. There are some people that I just can't read because they don't make any sense. But I was wondering if you wanted to share any thoughts about how blogs and social media represent an opportunity for teachers' voices to be heard. If people post things on Facebook or Twitter or Reddit or other media sites, and whether technology democratizes the process, letting everybody have a voice. It's great when you hear from smart teachers who have thought these things through, and not so great when you hear from, again, crazy people. But can teacher leaders take advantage of social media, and what have you discovered by roaming around in ed policy world online? Possibilities, pitfalls, and so on. So, what do you think?
Okay, I'd like to comment on that. I felt kind of uncomfortable reading a lot of them. Probably one of the strange ones in the group is I'm very conservative. And a lot of the blogs that are out there really did not, and maybe I was reading the wrong ones, but I felt uncomfortable reading them. And as an educator, I am very, how can I say this? I don't want to put anything out there on social media. So not only am I old school in that I don't want to put all my business out there, but I don't want to express my opinions out there and have it bounce back on me. We have to be politically correct, and I feel like on these blogs, sometimes people are not politically correct. And I don't want it to blow back on me when my opinions are different. Now, in reaching out to one of my people that I sent to you, one of them was Dr. Siddiqui, who is a school board representative from Chesterfield County, but he was also a work for the State Board of Education, and he's part of this education consortium down in North Carolina. He was the principal of my daughter's middle school. And one of the things he said that the best way for communication for him is by email. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And I think that in looking at the questions on here, for me personally, I think it would be better for me to communicate through email and face-to-face and not use any other social media type of outlet.
Lorna, and to piggyback on what you're saying, I actually spoke with Siddiqui as well, and asked him about the social media, and he said that it's with the times, because I told him too that I'm not a big social media person. I don't have Facebook, and I don't tweet and do all that kind of stuff, and I do feel like that's, especially our county, that's kind of how we're moving there, which kind of scares me, because if I want to go further in the county, I guess I have to get involved in that. But like you, I don't like it. I think there's too many things that can go wrong with it. He says he uses it to showcase what goes on in the county. And when I got on it, I noticed that it was just pictures of all the different schools that he goes to, but not much chatter.
I found with Twitter, I use Twitter a lot I have an educational Twitter. And so I tweet, I guess, with educational people in the educational field, but it was a good way to venture out and look at policies, but kind of anonymously. And I don't necessarily tweet back or retweet or any of that stuff, but it gives me it's almost like a library of resources that I can choose. And if I do feel uncomfortable, I go on to the next person, and I try to follow people who have the same educational philosophy as I do, and how I can get plugged in with them and whatnot in that area. So I found Twitter, as, even though I was leery of getting started, as a good resource.
I think the feelings that some people are having are legitimate, because I think, using it in a professional way and finding out how to do that is great. But it is a fine line. We know that social media, everybody putting everything out there, that can be really a bit too much. And I think, a lot of, unfortunately, what I've seen moving from New York and then coming to Virginia is that, there's a lot of negativity instead of trying to make it something positive, where you're trying to grow, you're trying to get resources, you're trying to improve, your pedagogy or whatever you're doing in the classroom. There's still some people who I think as adults are having a hard time balancing that social media element. And, when I have students who say, well, I would love to become a teacher, but everything's so negative, I'm not sure that that's something that I want to do. I think that's something that we need to deal with as educators as well. If we're going to use that, if, that's the way that we're moving into the future, how are we able to balance that in a positive way? Like you mentioned, Twitter, finding ways to improve on yourself as a professional.
If I could hop in, I've been using social media more in the last few years because of the nature of my business, and it's partly how I connect with teachers from all over the country. My platform of choice is LinkedIn, because it is a professional platform that's intended to showcase you as a professional and to help you share posts or to share articles that you've run across with groups that you belong to who are like-minded and who have similar interests. You can find a group for just about any interest that you'd be thinking that you might have an interest in. I also use Facebook and Twitter. And often Facebook is more for family and friends and fun, more or less. And Twitter is something I'm still learning. I saw somebody post in the chat box that they didn't understand Twitter, and I'm not sure I do understand it, but I do use it and have made some good connections with it. What I would offer is that if you don't feel comfortable using a platform, then you shouldn't. You don't, and I don't think anyone should feel bullied into using a medium that they don't feel totally comfortable with. At the same time, not using it at all can cut off your opportunities to learn the latest trends, about research that's going on, and to find resources that might actually help you in your teaching. And just a perfect example of 2 contacts I've made in the last 2 weeks. I ran across a book called First Aid for Teacher Burnout, brand new book by a PhD out in Laguna Beach, California. I read the book. I decided to write a post about it because I do think it's a great resource for teachers who may be suffering from the beginning symptoms of teacher burnout. And I contacted the author through LinkedIn, and we're going to be talking on the phone together next week to talk about shared interests. I would have never been able to do that without LinkedIn. And then the other individual I found that you all might actually enjoy listening to is a woman named Angela Watson, who has, oh gosh, I forgot that she has a podcast, and I want to say it's called Truth for Teachers, but that might not be the name. But Angela Watson, she records a podcast every Sunday night that is intended to give her teacher listeners a motivational boost for the week, a tip of some sort to help streamline their work, be more productive, cut some hours off of their workload, different strategies that she learned as a teacher herself. I think she's an 11-year veteran. And so there are really nice resources out there that if you find them and can take advantage of them, they can help you tremendously. So that's my 2 cents worth on social media. I think it's great if you want to use it. I don't think you should feel like you have to use it.
Can you repeat the name of the book?
The name of the book, First Aid, I got it right here. First Aid for Teacher Burnout, How You Can Find Peace and Success. The author's name is Jenny Grant Rankin, Rankin. Yeah, I've got it on Amazon. I forget exactly how I ran across it, but it's brand new. It just recently came out. And like I said, I connected with her on LinkedIn, and we have exchanged emails through LinkedIn, and we have plans to connect next week. I have another book, too, in case you're interested. I haven't read this one yet. The Happy Teacher Habits, 11 Habits of the Happiest, Most Effective Teachers on Earth.
Who wrote that? And what's is it like the...
The author is Michael Linson, Linsin.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's my next.
Kitty, will you post those on the Facebook page
Yes, I'll be happy to.
so that people can check there? Yeah, good. Thank you.
Nancy, since we're talking about burnout, I think
Other thoughts?
Nancy, I was just going to say that recently, since we're talking about burnout and we're talking about these school districts, so we just completed a report with Hanover and Chesterfield, and Henrika were all part of a study on teacher morale. And so that's something that I could send people a link to, but we've interviewed 44 teachers in the region, and there are policy recommendations that are going to their superintendents. They're all getting together in February, and the Center for Teacher Leadership, we're presenting to them. We'd like you to implement these particular policy recommendations on improving teacher morale. And some of them are building level. They are things that teachers can do individually. So, so that's something I can make sure that folks get if they're interested.
Yes. You're on the Facebook page, so post it there. So it's a reminder, and that is one way that technology makes it easier to connect and to communicate. And I understand people's wariness about certain social media platforms, and as Laura said, letting people see your business. It is dangerous, and there are teachers who have been severely chatted with for things that they said online. And
targeted. So
yes,
you have to be realistic about it, and especially understanding where your administration is coming from. If they don't like being criticized, then it's not a good idea to criticize them on Facebook or anywhere else.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about blogs, things that you read, and I really appreciated your comments on the blogs, that being informative, and how easy they were to navigate and to manage. And blogs have a tendency to come and go. They last for a few years, and then it's the same old people talking to the same old people about the same old stuff, and then somebody new pops up, and so they're kind of short-lived. But final thoughts? All right, let's take the last 20 minutes or so and talk a little bit about your projects for this class, and see if anybody has any questions. And I'm going to share one of the tools with that, the designing your own project. These are three thoughts that I lifted from Awakening the Sleeping Giant. And I especially like the first: if we design our own leadership roles, we're obligated to accept the accountability that comes with them. So I'm thinking here about Gail saying, wouldn't it be great if we had some kind of teacher recruitment, policy initiative to get world language teachers into Virginia, because they're so desperately needed. And then I'm thinking, okay, are you willing to evaluate the success of those teachers, and if they're not working out, have an exit strategy for them? And I'm wondering what all of you think about taking a leadership role and the obligation to accept accountability when things don't go right in a project.
I'm sorry, my dog distracted me over here, and that's the problem with being at home sometimes. What were you saying about?
Yeah.
I was just like, project.
What am I asking?
Wait a minute.
Yeah, I'm saying that I'm starting to read your project ideas, and you're sending things in saying, I think I want to work on this. Like maybe I think I want to work. A couple of people have kind of tossed an idea out about, I'd like to work on building climate, because the people in my maybe you could use Kitty. She has a lot of expertise in this area, but people are discouraged. People are feeling like this is not why I went into teaching, and I can't do what I love to do. And so how might you structure a long-term project to build morale, or to get the adults in your building in control of their own work? Or so if you design a leadership role for yourself, because it's not a matter of, well, I'm a teacher leader or I'm not a teacher leader. It's a matter of what's the leadership work you're going to do, and are you obligated to accept accountability that comes with that role? In other words, if you don't make the impact that you hope to make, are you willing to accept that? Or if something goes wrong, are you willing to step up and take responsibility for that?
I think by nature as teachers, I do this in my classroom all the time. If a lesson doesn't go the way that I expected it to go, I apologize to my kids and I say, all right, this did not work out. I'm sorry. We're going to try it this way. We're going to do it again. Or my bad, I don't have enough copies because the copier ate 25 of them. I think that we are so used to taking ownership for the successes and the mistakes at a fault almost, because at least I do it daily in my classroom with my teenagers. So I don't think that it would be too hard for me personally if something crashes and burns. Hey, at least I tried. And I'm okay with things crashing and burning. Of course, the perfectionist in me wants everything to be perfect, but after 13 years of dealing with kids, you realize that it's not possible. So I think that's kind of taken me down a couple notches in the perfectionist area.
Thank you. That was a great comment. I appreciate that. The last question I think is a good one too, as you start thinking about what it is that you want to do. Is your context a democratic community? And there are any number of school staffs where the principal will say, we're like a family. And I would think, oh no, please don't be like a family. Because what you really want to be is a democratic community where people have the courage to say what they're thinking, where power is shared. Because in families, some people are suppressed and very often the power is not shared. But that's a good question. Is the context where you're headed to do a project, is it one where power is going to be shared? I have read many times, and this came up again tonight in various ways, I'd really like to have a say about this, but no one's listening to me, or I can only do what I'm told to do by people who are above me, and so I close my door and teach. And maybe these are just things that are not particularly useful right now, but thoughts about your context?
Can you hear me? It's Allison.
Yeah. Yes.
I was looking at that question and just wondered, what did that mean? Okay, what is your context, a democratic community? Or is your context? And for me, it's kind of weird. My own project that I'm working on is directly related to us within this community. There are 9 of us, and I know, Tammy, you're on here too, and we've been working together. There are 9 of us in this group that started out 3 years ago. Well, 2.5, I guess. 2 3/4. We're almost done, girls. But where we started out in this project of this 3-year role for this teacher leader endorsement. And it's been interesting over the 3 years how things have shifted and changed. And, you know, we've kind of felt like the CTL community is a family in some sense, that we're all working for the same purpose. But there were things lost on the way from day one to today. And so I've been working with Tammy trying to figure out, okay, how can we readjust the goals of this cohort? How can we make sure that what our end goal in sight is the beginning goal for somebody else coming in? So we've been working together trying to just broaden those lines of communication where we're all on the same page. Because it's been one thing where we feel like Center for Teacher Leadership has said something, and then we're not hearing necessarily the same thing, but we're kind of bringing that all back together, which I think is important, because if you're going to put all this time into this work, you know, and it started, I mean, I can't say this for sure, but there were at least 30 people, probably maybe 40, that started with this group, and there are 9 of us at the end in this end of the 3-year project for the cohort. And you know, we wanted to make sure that we've streamlined the communication between everybody, that we have all done this. So what we've done is, and this is my project, we've created a proposal to have a teacher leader advocate on the Meta Planning Council Committee, to meet with them regularly, that way that we can make sure what their goal in the end is the same as our goal in the end, but we're getting feedback from everybody. The first thing I said to Tammy when I talked to her was that it would be like having a PTA meeting without teachers. You know, it seems silly having like a PTA board meeting without major players in the group. So we talked about the Meta Planning Council, how there are the folks from VCU and then the folks from each county, but not necessarily the teacher leaders, but the whole thing is about teacher leadership. So somewhere along the way, we need to be included in that. Does that make sense?
Just to me, it makes perfect sense. I really like the PTA without the teachers. You know,
I mean, how can you have a board meeting without teacher input? It would be like having a PTA board meeting without the principal. You know, you got to have all the major players in the game.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And that's your context right there. You need to make it work on making it a democratic community, and good luck with that.
Yes, we wish good luck. Right up there, the 9 of us, we developed a proposal, and it's coming out. And you know, we hope that VCU and the, you know, eventually it'll get to the superintendents. We hope that they realize that this is an important piece, and that we, although it's not a school project, it's a project related to everything that we're all doing. And that's what makes it, you know, ultimately more important for future people in the program.
Yeah, yes. And that's why the guidelines on this project have been so flexible. And we have, you have a flexible framework, it makes it harder. It would be a lot easier just to say, do this, and then send it to me, and I will check it off. But that doesn't work. You're really not building leadership then when you make people do a thing. They have to find their own work. They have to, as it says, design their own leadership role. So I'm just kind of throwing this out there. This is just a start as this goes along, because these projects have a way of becoming, failing spectacularly and needing to be redone, or becoming an ongoing thing. You know, when you think you're going to be done, and then there's more work to be done, and it's really hard to put a timeline and a framework around them. But it's good work. it's
It
important
is
work 'cause
tricky.
it's
I mean, the
coming.
first of this was just me sending Terry Dozier an email. And then she was like, well, we need to really think about this, and we need a proposal, and we need this. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Oh, yep, you're right. It's one of those things that you can just send off an email, which I kind of thought at the beginning, but where you can send off email and you can just say, okay, I think this should happen. How does it happen? And now we're in the process of figuring out how it happens. And if it doesn't happen, that's fine, but at least we've put a bug in their ear.
Right. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's just the perfect example of how you can plan and you can plan, and then you end up someplace completely different doing something else. But you realize you could say, what's the need? What needs to be changed? What needs to happen? And then somebody's going to say to you, okay, go ahead and do it. So thank you, Allison. That really helps. All right, we're winding up here. We've got 6 minutes left here, and I wanted to share this tool with you. This in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to put out the next 2 modules, and they're just, like I said, tools to help you think about your project. And this is one of the tools that when people use it, they like it, and they say, I never thought about this. And it's a stakeholder grid. And I used this one. This is from the last time that I facilitated this class, and the project was a mentoring project. This was a high school teacher who thought that mentoring in his school was being done particularly badly. Michigan has a law that says every first-year teacher through fourth-year teacher needs to have a mentor. That's what the law says. That's it. Those mentors don't have to be trained. They don't have to be paid. They don't have to even meet with the person that they're mentoring. You just have to have one. And so it's a terrible policy. And he wanted to do a better job in his building with this project. By the way, this guy, he did this project, started it 2 years ago. He carried it on this year. It got bigger and better this year. But he left in the middle of the school year to go work for the Michigan Department of Education. So his leadership catapulted him into a whole new job. But anyway, this was his stakeholder grid. And you'll get a blank one of these, and it asks you to think about all of the people who might be impacted by what you're planning to do. The people who will be resistant to what you want to do, and on whom this has high impact, people who are not really going to care that you're doing this, or will be enthusiastically embracing it and be impacted by it, and so on. And he decided that the people who had high resistance and high impact were people who were already set up as mentors but weren't doing anything. And so he kind of put these people around this grid, and it reminded him who he needed to talk to and who he needed to get on his side. And then he drew some little arrows, the struggling novice teachers. Right now, they were getting no impact from mentoring, and he wanted to move them into these different areas and so on. So this is just an example of the stuff that's going to be coming into your inbox and is going to be posted on the Facebook page. And speaking of posting on the Facebook page, I am inviting you again, if you find an article or a blog or a piece of research or a cartoon or anything that you find interesting, it's time to start sharing those things with the other people. I'm not sharing any more readings with you, except for random stuff that crosses my desk. It's time for you to start saying, I read this and I think it's interesting. And so please do that. Post something on the Facebook page. Start a new conversation about a leadership issue. Let's see, what else? the face-to-face, we are not having another webinar until May. There is a face-to-face meeting on March 11th, and the purpose of that meeting will be to share your project. That doesn't mean your project needs to be done. It needs to be drawn up, absolutely, by March 11th. And so it's a face-to-face meeting at VCU. There will be more details about times and places. Kitty will be facilitating that meeting since she lives in Virginia. And you'll be listening to what other people are doing and offering them feedback and advice and resources. And those meetings are usually really energetic and really hard to control, because once people start talking about what they want to do, they can ramble on. So put that on your calendar. And I think that's it. Any questions about the project or about tonight or about what's coming up next? You guys rock, by the way. That was a great discussion tonight. Lots of good points, and you're not afraid to say what you think, and I love that. So, anything else? No? Kitty? Tammy? Anything? Crickets? Excellent. All right. Thanks for coming tonight. And the slides and the recording will be posted on the Facebook page tomorrow. If you think of anything between now and then and you want to add a comment, it is 8:30 on the dot. And you're out of here. So thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.